Full Fathom 5 by Toby Bennett. The jugmen were playing a jaunty tune when the stranger entered the tavern. His skins were pulled tight as befitted the squall outside. Tom hadn't known weather like it since he'd served on a merchantman going round the Horn. The room rang with the sound, and thunder crashed in rhythm with the piping from the other end of the tavern. Tom winced at the noise and cradled his pounding head. The newcomer looked as storm-tossed as any in the room, and as run down as the establishment itself, come to that. Tom couldn't remember what had brought him in. He'd clearly drunk enough of the black grog to relieve him of that particular burden. Now that the storm had set in, it looked like he was there for the duration. The stranger tipped his head and water ran down onto the stained boards. The puddle around the new arrival grew, and though he didn't exactly know why, Tom drew his feet up and hung his heels against the crossbar of his stool, as if touching that expanding pool was bad luck. Luck! All pirates were obsessed with it. He'd once even heard of a captain who insisted that all the nails in his ship be made from melted-down horseshoes. Not that he put much stock in it, mind, but luck did seem to have a lot to do with feet. Rabbit's feet, horses' shoes. When he was a boy, they'd told him stepping in cow shit was good luck, so now he drew up his feet in order not to step in whatever luck the stranger might have tipped out of his hat. Tom looked back to the white froth on the top of his mug, but his sense of unease did not abate. If anything, it intensified. Things were still hazy, but he was sure he knew the tavern's latest patron. Tom fought to put a name to the memory.
Gold Knight.
The man sat down next to him. His voice was harsh as a rusted hinge. Tom noticed that he wore a kerchief tied tight about his neck. He would not be surprised if the yellow cloth hid some badly healed scar. Out of habit, Tom checked the man's hand. The left was hidden from view, but the fingers of the fellow's right hand were heavy with gold. There was even a ring bearing a coat of arms. Tom's eyes narrowed. He'd had one just like that, once. Annoyance replaced caution. Perhaps the man next to him was no stranger to the tavern. Tom couldn't remember his own first night in the place, so it stood to reason that he might have forgotten the man. He'd always been too fond of cards when the drink was on him. Tom clenched his fist. No one took anything from Black Tom if they knew what was good for them.
It is nice, is it not?
The older man smiled amiably at him, and Tom was more certain than ever that they had been face to face before. He tried to spark his memory by picturing the scene as it must have played out. The old upstart grinning away over a fat hand. The ace no doubt drawn from a sleeve. Tom was just about ready to swing at the outrage, but his fists never left the bar. That picture wasn't right. It was somewhere else he had seen the man.
Perhaps you want a closer look.
The buccaneer slipped the signet from his finger and rolled it between thumb and forefinger.
Don't stand for much anymore, but I kept it with me when I went to sea. Brother drank away the rest of the name.
I prefer rum to names. Tom took a long pull of his grog and slipped off the bar stool. He winced as his boots hit the water that covered the floor. How wet had the bastard got out there? Only one way to deal with bad luck once you're touched. Drink it away. He took the next swallow too fast and almost choked. The stuff was like making love in a hide canoe. Fucking close to water. He stumbled off to the booth at the darkest corner of the room and stared out at the sorry flotsam that had washed up against the chipped bar. Miscreants one and all, gold teeth, elaborate patches and wooden legs. The reward for a lifetime of chasing far-off sails on foul winds. At least the wretches with wooden legs understood how lucky you were if you still had feet. Tom smiled at his own joke. There was a squelching sound and the old buccaneer sat himself down on the other side of the table. "I know you, friend," Tom growled. The buccaneer's teeth jutted from his drawn lips.
I thought we had the makings of a conversation there,
he said.
Something that might interest both of us.
The ring appeared in the buccaneer's hand, and he let it roll onto the table. The filthy bastard takes advantage of me while I'm drunk, and then tries to sell me back my own property, Tom thought. Tom opened his mouth to tell the upstart where he could shove his conversation, but the words wouldn't come out. The ring flashed and rolled halfway over the unvarnished table before faltering and tipping over. Tom watched the gold as it spent the last of its momentum. If there hadn't been a storm outside, he might have grabbed the ring and made a run for it. The thunder was slowing now, but there was still no way he was leaving the tavern any time soon.
You always did like the signet, didn't you, Tom?
The buccaneer said. Tom's eyes shot up from the ring, and he studied the man in front of him more intently. They knew each other all right. If he could only recall... "First names, is it now?" Tom said. "You have me at a disadvantage, comrade. We met here last night, no doubt. I fear the memory of the event is as foggy as a watch at 3 bells. The buccaneer chuckled.
"'Tis not the first time the ground has been uneven between us, Tom."
He reached to take back the ring, and Tom flung out a hand to grip his wrist. The bones pressed hard against his palm through the fabric of the oilskin, and it seemed as if his hand might burn at the touch. Tom's eyes widened, and he snatched back his meaty paw. There was more than one tale of sea witches that made the round through the ragged fleets of the Caribbean, but Tom had never thought to meet a sorcerer in person. He unconsciously made the sign of the evil eye, and his own eyes swiveled to the door. Perhaps the storm was worth risking after all. The buccaneer roared with laughter at his reaction.
"Tom, you always were a bit touched, weren't you? I swear you thought the way Weevil's fell out of a biscuit would mean a storm."
Thunder rolled outside, and the gaunt man sobered quickly.
"You got it right sometimes, though, didn't you, mate?"
The man leant close enough that Tom could smell his rotten breath.
"And we both know you can eat anything, don't we?"
The buccaneer tittered, and his tousled hair danced round his head like a flame. Who is he? Tom's hand still smarted from the cold that had radiated off the stranger. If he were not a sorcerer, what could explain that dreadful sensation? The man across from him had retrieved the ring and set it back upon his bony finger.
"Don't fit right anymore, does it?"
the buccaneer asked. He slammed his other hand down on the rough wooden table, and Tom noticed the missing ring finger. An image flashed through Tom's befuddled mind. Slow blood oozing as he worked the knife in just above the knuckle, the snapping of bone, the weight of the ring as it fell onto his own hand. "It's not possible," he breathed. The buccaneer drew back his hand slowly.
"Oh, I wouldn't say that. I found anything is possible if you make the right connections."
Tom's eyes strayed to the stained cloth about the buccaneer's throat. He knew there would be a scar there. After all, he had cut it himself. Bartholomew? The name belonged to another life, a time when he had been scared and desperate.
"That's Captain Collins to you, boy,"
the older man said amiably. Tom slid his legs back under the bench, preparing to rise quickly and show Collins that he was no longer the youth the captain had bullied all those years ago. "You've made a mistake seeking me out, Captain," he growled. "I don't know how you survived that extra smile I gave you, but I don't do my work from behind no more." The captain's eyes rolled lazily in his head.
"Should I be scared, mate? You run a jagged blade over my neck. You take me precious family heirloom, and it should be me that's quaking here. The lessons I taught you may be long forgot, but think, man, you're unarmed, unsteady, and taken astern, and you think it's you should be threatening a broadside."
Prickly fear ran down Tom's spine. Why was the man so calm? Could he have help at hand? Tom scanned the common room again with a leery eye. Sure enough, he felt a shock of recognition go through him at the sight of some of those gathered at the bar. His head throbbed as he bore down on those memories, seeking names to go with faces, histories to match uneasy suspicion. Captain Collins winked conspiratorially.
"You begin to see it now, don't you, Tom?"
That man at the left of the bar, that's Hampton Pepys. Collins swiveled slightly.
"Why, that be Mr. Pepys. Just one more scallywag on me fine new crew."
Pepys threw them a wave.
"You took his eye, did you not, Tom?"
"Took that and more besides, I thought." Tom swallowed. "And that's Jim Fawkes." Collins's teeth flashed.
"Why, old Jim too. You ran him off the plank, he told me."
With his hands tied in lead sinkers on his boots, How could it be possible they had all survived? Captain Collins loosened his great coat, and something stirred beneath the stained kerchief that bound his throat. A thick purple eel distended from beneath the cloth like some obscene parody of a tongue, and fell squirming on the table between them. "There's more water beneath that coat than upon it." Tom registered the thought from a great distance. His mind was screaming for him to get out, but there were two lads by the barred door now. He recognized the closer of the two as Sam Tuppen, another lad he'd thought long scourged and sunk. It had to be some terrible dream, or maybe worse. It had not been so long since he had decided to end things with Bijou. The bitch was half crazy, but she'd sworn her voodoo kept him safe, and that he'd been cursed when he threw her over. Then there was that idol with the fierce eyes and jagged teeth. He'd wanted shot of it almost as soon as he'd got it, but gold trumped superstition. Or so he had been fool enough to believe. He wasn't so sure now. When you found yourself in the same room with at least 6 men you thought you'd put down, you had to know that your situation went beyond mere ill luck.
"Jim and I reached the bottom more or less whole,"
Collins was saying. He drew back the kerchief and plucked a crab from between the uneven flaps of lifeless flesh at his throat.
"Apologies."
He flicked the crustacean into a corner.
"But those don't half itch if you let 'em burrow in."
"You're not here," Tom whispered. "None of you can be. It's the booze is all." Collins snorted.
"Oh, it's not that. Though you no doubt regret your last drink."
The captain laughed at some joke all his own.
"Let me assure you from bitter, bloody experience that the grog here is always tasteless and about as intoxicating as bilge water."
Collins locked eyes with Tom.
"The fact is, my beauty, that you are here, and so are we. Been waiting a long time for you. Last to sign on, in fact."
"I didn't sign nothing. Never would, no matter what you say," Tom bellowed, rising to his feet. The captain's lips spread wide.
"Oh, you didn't sign nothing, my love. But I did. Like I told you, it's amazing what is possible when you can make the right connections."
Collins rose slowly, and Tom found himself rooted to the spot.
"We've all been waiting for Black Tom for a while now, ain't we, lads?"
Murmurs of agreement rippled through the bar.
"Some has been especially eager to see you. Perhaps you didn't recognize Mr. Eckridge. First mate as was, but since your association it is hard for anyone to recognize Mr. Eckridge."
The second man at the door tilted his head so that the dim candlelight crept up under his hood. His skull was a mess of partially hacked and chewed flesh.
"I'm not sure I would have started with the face myself,"
Collins mocked.
"Cheeks are soft enough to a hungry man, I suppose, but the nose is more gristle than I can stomach. Leastways, when there are better cuts to hand. I reckon we can all count ourselves fortunate that your feast was cut short before you could gnaw on anything vital."
Collins paused.
"I say all, but that's not entirely accurate. What was it? A whole day after you brained him that the Violet picked you up?"
Collins leaned closer.
"I'm afraid Mr. Eckridge is of the opinion that if you'd held off hitting him with that oar just a little longer, they would have saved him too."
Tom's stomach lurched, and he sprayed the tasteless grog over his former captain's boots before falling to the floor. He lay there in his own filth, his gaze drawn over the rough boards, past the stained silver buckles of the captain's footwear and up into Eckridge's harrowed visage. The floor beneath him was no longer solid, but heaved the way the cursed lifeboat had when the two men had shed it all those years ago. "'Twas him or me," Tom insisted silently. "A man's got to eat." But it was easier to vomit out stale grog than hollow protestations. Those settled in his stomach like lead, and he was powerless to shift them, no matter how he heaved. The faceless man stared back at him just as he had when Tom had first sliced away his lips and used them to bait a hook.
"Come now, Tom. No need to take on so before we get to sea. It's rough enough out there to make you wish for this sanctuary."
The thunder rolled and lightning flashed through the gap beneath the door. "Please, God, spare me!" Tom threw his arm around himself and rocked against the boards. The sharp tang of vomit filled his nose. Captain Collins knelt down, his 3-fingered hand flat against the sodden boards. His face filled Tom's vision, and he turned his head at a peculiar angle as he regarded Tom.
We're past gods, Tom. No gods, nor salvation neither. They never were for men like you or I.
The captain jerked his head in the direction of the ragged ship hands scattered around the common room.
I paid much for this crew, Tom, more than I could afford. But I wanted to be sure that there wouldn't be no one for you to miss. They're all here, Tom. Every betrayed, backstabbed wretch you left in your wake.
Collins winced.
That didn't come cheap. The seller really gouged me. But it wasn't nothing compared to what I promised for my true prize. Can you guess what that was, Tom?
Tom stayed silent. The haze that had been on his mind seemed a blessing compared to the memories that assailed him now. Each man or woman in the room had a story. Each one represented a debt he could never pay.
It's not gold, nor jewels, not a lass's warm touch, or one sip of proper rum. I sold my soul, Tom, mine and many that have yet to be collected, for revenge.
Understanding began to dawn in Tom's struggling mind. The bad taste in his mouth, the disorientation. That voodoo slut had always mixed a mean poison. A toast to say goodbye, idiot! Collins was still talking. Tom could hardly blame the man for wanting his moment. He must have waited long enough, but the words washed over him. Tom could already guess what his old captain was going to say.
I gave everything I could, Tom. Everything they would take.
Collins's eyes bulged and squirming forms moved beneath his heavy coat.
Just to be able to stand here and be the first to tell you that you're on my crew again. And all my crew, Tom, all my crew is dead and damned.